Of course, one was of course the marvelous space which was there, which I was unused to in places like Dharwad. The way and the way it was being used. One really went there really to see Alkazi's productions. I think I saw Alkazi do Christopher Fry's plays. The Lady Is Not for Burning. And English plays like that. And along with that, because I was interested in painting, I saw Gaitonde, I saw Hussain in those days there, and the musical performances going on. So it was a tremendously live space, and I was fascinated by it because I had not seen anything like that. A multi-art center in Sirsi or Dharwad, where I had come from. We used to go there quite often. Then, of course, I went to England. I came back in '63, and by that time, Satyadev was there, and Satyadev was rehearsing. I saw Satyadev do his Chekhov and other farces there. But beyond that, I don't think I can say very much. Then I went to Madras and lost touch with it. So my memory of it is of very romantic space, romantic things happening to which one wanted to join: theatre, music, painting, and so on. And then a great regret when I heard that they were actually pulling it down and building a skyscraper in its place. I mean, that feeling of regret was all around. There was a feeling that Mrs. Bhulabhai Desai had been misled, or given images which, because the national center was supposed to come there. You see, so far as I can remember, my memory is not very sure, is first you had the rooms inside the building itself, and then there was a terrace-like extension. Then you came down the steps, and then it went on into the grounds. So there were several layers, levels actually, of space available, open air space, really. Well, whether it was lawn or whether it was marble put, I don't know. No, but it was lawn level. Then there was a higher level, the steps and so on, where in fact Alkazi used to do his plays. We used to sit in the at the lawn level. The audience would sit at the lower level, and the plays would be done at a slightly higher level. That was also the route for going into the building, where in fact there were you saw these painters painting. Gaitonde was there. All these Raza, a lot of the early painters who hadn't yet got recognition to the extent that they have now were there. So the whole concept of an open air theatre was to me new, and that was breathtaking. The only problem was that it could then happen. It couldn't happen in the monsoons and so on. It had to be closed, and sometimes the wind used to be so hard that you couldn't hear what was being said. Blowing, these new buildings hadn't come then. The sea breeze used to come straight onto the Bhulabhai. It was memorable. She I think worked with the Alkazi, didn't she? She was his. That's when she went and she worked. But she also told me that she didn't learn. She didn't look upon him as a guru or anything. Just acted in his place. That's all.
Artists had their little rooms as studios, is it? Was it like a...
No. The artists had a huge hall. This is a Prashasta 19th century kind of building. Huge halls all over. So you saw painting by Gaitonde here, another one by Souza there, and one was taken over. And Gaitonde struck one because he was the first really abstract painter. Just little one white strip in the corner of a red background, that kind of thing. So I remember him. And there were all these other artists, and they all were the paintings at least were there. Where they worked were where the studios were, I don't know. I couldn't say. Alkazi was very much the presence there because you saw him there all the time.
And Ravi Shankar,
I
I
didn't.
hear.
Huh?
Ravi Shankar was there.
Oh, Ravi Shankar, you mean the Sitaria? Oh, of course. Yes. So I don't think I will be really able to enrich very much more on that because it was only for 2 years. I was at that time dreaming of going abroad, so one just sort of took it in passing, and one didn't really see it as an important space until I came back. When I came back in '63, and then I was with Oxford University Press and so on. Then Dubai was there. Then one saw Dubai's. Then one went to see Dubai's farces that he himself had written, and Chekhov's farces, which he was excellent at doing. Absolutely, yes. In fact, not only the first encounter, when I came back, there was a actress called Farida Sonawala, who travelled with me to Oxford, the same board the ship. A marvelous actress, because I had seen her in Eurydice, produced by Alkazi.
Suddenly last summer.
Huh?
Did you see that?
No, but I saw his Antigone with the Kusumbel and Alaknanda Samarth used to play Alkazi was very good at this intense, quivering heroines who sort of spat out words, that kind of thing. That kind of performance. While Farida was down to earth, excellent actress. And, then she travelled on board the ship with me. Then when I came back, one saw a lot of her in Bombay, and she then told me that there is a Satyadev Dubey, why don't you go and see him? So I went and met Satyadev Dubey, I think at Bhulabhai Desai Auditorium, and not a propitious meeting, it wasn't, because Satyadev was fairly antagonistic from the word go, snarly. I have written about it. He wouldn't tell me what was bothering him. And we talked for about 10-15 minutes and so on. And suddenly he turned around and said, what's the point of writing all these plays in English? Who are you writing them for? How can you express Indian culture in English? So I said, I don't know, but I have not written them in English, I have written them in Kannada, I said. So suddenly his face fell, and he looked as though he had bashed, as though he had been beaten, and sort of looked around and sort of looked like and said, all right, you read the play to me, I'll see what it is. So I taken the play. So then I read out Yayati to him from Kannada directly into English, which I'm quite good at actually. I can pick up a book. I can do that. This is how Samskara become a film and all that sort of thing. So I just read out Yayati from the beginning to end to Satyadev, and he listened to it and he commented on the imagery in Sharmishta. He was very sympathetic. By that time he had become, all this, and then he said, I would like to put this on stage. So he was the first man to tell me that my plays were stageable. He did it, it took him 3 years to do after that. He actually produced it in 1967. By that time, of course, the National School of Drama had already produced Tughlaq, by the time he did. And he was very angry with that, because Karant had delayed the translation. And he said, now look, the credit has gone to Alkazi, he said, for discovering you. I wanted to do you. I told you first that I was going to do your play, etc. All that. I went through that business of it. But when he read Tughlaq, of course, he was bowled over, because he said it's like an RSS tract, he said. Everything RSS has been saying is there in Tughlaq, he said. For instance, there is a line there which says that, for instance, in the crowd scene, one of the persons said, don't trust these Hindus, they will today say your bhai bhai, tomorrow they will say Muhammad Paigambar was the 11th incarnation of Vishnu. So be careful. He said, this is what we've been saying, about it, etc. So right through, then how minorities should not be pampered, Ratan Singh situation. So all that he had read, so he was very keen on that. But he had promised that he would do Yayati, and he did Yayati. It was a brilliant, to me anyway, a brilliant production. Apparently, when they started doing it, it was Sulbha's sister who was doing Chitralekha. By the time I saw it, it was, I think, the younger sister, Asha. She was apparently brilliant. When I saw this, this was Rekha Sabnis was doing it when I was doing it. Well, Rekha, Satyadev as Yayati, Amrish, and then of course Sunila. And no, Chitra wasn't doing that. No, Sunila was Devyani from the beginning. From the word go, Sunila was Devyani, and Sulbha Deshpande was Sharmishta. No. Sorry, Tarla Mehta was Sharmishta, and Sulbha Deshpande was doing the Dasi. He had asked her to do Devyani's role, and apparently Sulbha said, I'm not sexy enough for that role. And so he said, these Maharashtrian women, what can you do with them? All that I heard. All that also I heard a long tract on that. Maharashtrian women and asking them to do sexy roles. So But with Sunila there was no problem at all, because they had a crisis with the costume, because whoever has designed the costumes wanted the women to be bare shoulders and so on. And they all sort of said, "Arey nahi, nahi, I think Sunila came and said, no, bare shoulders, okay, bare shoulders, no problem." So after that, everyone wear bare shoulders costume and so on. Satyadev as Puru and so on. And yes, that was my real encounter with him. And I was completely enamored of that production. He redid that in Marathi with Lagu, but it didn't quite work out. One thing is, of course, that Amrish, by his very presence, a lot that was lacking in the play was made up by Amrish's presence, I think, in the Yayati's character and so on. Lagu felt uncomfortable. He said, I can't feel the character, I'm not happy with it, etc., etc. And the Marathi production wasn't actually although it imitated the Marathi Hindi production, it was not a successful production. You see, to me, theatre represented. I had come to the Dharwad from Sirsi, and the professional companies one had seen were the Natak company tradition. So the tradition I had known was of Natak companies, of proscenium theatre and so on. Then in Bombay, Ashok and I saw a lot of Marathi plays, Katyar Kannada Ghusli, all those plays, the successful plays, we used to go. But really, theatre was opened out by Alkazi. Really, what Alkazi did, particularly his production of Miss Julie, for instance, his production of Antigone, his production of Eurydice, Anu's productions of Eurydice and so on. And it was not just the space, there were all kinds of things that baffled me and Ashok also. I remember because there was a scene, I remember a moment in Miss Julie where Jean is listening and Miss Julie is giving a long sentimental speech. She's crying and he's looking at her, and some sentimental music is going on at the background. She finishes it, Jean takes out a matchstick, puts a cigarette and goes, strikes the match. As soon as it strikes the match, at the exact moment, the music stopped, the lights came on, the mood changed. Thunderstruck, what coordination, he just strikes that, all that sort of. But what bothered me was how did the lights go down and up? So slowly, because one was only used to switches being turned on. The whole notion that the fans can be made faster and slower, similarly lights can be made dimmer and sharper, didn't occur to one at all. And I asked Ashok, and Ashok asked Meghnad Desai, who's now Lord Meghnad of House of Lords. His one claim to fame is he explained what a dimmer is to Ashok. Because he used to be very active in Gujarati theatre, and so this time when I met in London, I said, "Do you know your contribution to my knowledge is how a dimmer works?" So we were that innocent, So on technical side, it was there, and of course, the psychology of something like Miss Julie or even Antigone was completely new. One's notion of what a Pauranik Natak was different. So those 2 years were a complete revolution or revaluation and whatever education. My notion of what theatre is completely changed after that. And my first play, Yayati, really the whole confrontation between Chitralekha and Yayati is straight out of Antigone. The older man and the younger woman saying, "I insist on my rights," and the older man saying, "No, be reasonable." So, although it happens only in the fourth act, but I must acknowledge that it was Alkazi's production of Antigone. And I think I saw that, I saw it in this, but I also saw it in Bhulabhai Auditorium. But the play I distinctly remember seeing in Bhulabhai Auditorium, this was The Lady is Not for Burning. Yeah, that was what I was trying to remember. Christopher Fry's play, Lady is Not for Burning. Then I think some Chekhov play, because I remember seeing Farooq, Vijaya's husband. I think it probably was Uncle Vanya, there. But Alkazi was no good at Chekhov. He was much better at this intense quivering. You see, I think Alkazi's contribution was not where he took us, but what he took us away from. Because the dominating figure was George Bernard Shaw, you know. So, modern play meant a living room, in the Marathi or Kannada version, a sofa and two chairs, and usually a servant dusting and opening the phone and saying, "Ha, hey, Rao Sahib यांचं घर आहे, नाही ते मुंबईला गेले आहेत, नाही बाई साहेब आहेत, बोलावतो," all that kind of. So all information was given on the phone and so on. So this is absolute derivative Shaw at his worst, but that was what to us was modern theatre. This is what we did in theatre, and Alkazi took it away. With Alkazi, he said, "No, that's not it." And there's a different kind of theatre, different kind of which he did with. The great advantage to us was that he looked at Europe. He just left aside England. He did, I think, he did Hedda Gabler, which was with Hima Kisakodi. He did, so he was interested in the European playwrights, particularly with female actors and so on. And that was a complete revolution. It was a complete education in theatre. God no. We used to. The only memory I have of Alkazi was I went to see, I think, Eurydice in Siddharth College. It was in Siddharth College, yeah, the hall. And we were in the gallery, me and Kave Munshi. And 2 or 3 boys, some college boys came and sort of started singing a song just before the play was to begin. And this very angry person walked out of the wings and jumped straight off the wings and stormed up the terrace. When Kave Munshi said, "That's Alkazi, now you will see drama." And these kids were poor 17, 18-year-old, unaware. Alkazi came and blasted them, and they were sort of, "Who are you? Who brought it up? Get out of here!" So, and you could see the kids just shriveled in front of him. That was quite a performance. and then they went. That was the only time I remember Alkazi. Then I saw him on a train going to Delhi, where I was told now he was going to take up the directorship of the National School of Drama. When he was going, I was also going for my Rhodes interviews. On the same train. You see, I was going to my Rhodes interviews, and I didn't know how to use fork and spoon. They said there was a dinner with the committee. So where to learn? One used to use fork and spoon, but there was something in those days called the Spencers. They used to serve Western breakfast and Western kind of food on railway trains. If you went to Spencer's, you got to. So I bought a book of etiquette, which I still have. Put the book of etiquette there and start from outside. You start with the spoon. The spoon is in front, so the spoon is on the right. Then spoon, you work your way in, tilt the soup bowl away from you. Never ask for a second. All that I learned from Bombay to Delhi in that, because there were 3 meals. You see, if you start, it was a whole day and next morning, and went to the. Of course, in the roads, people couldn't care less whether one did, because they knew we all came from Dharwad and so on. But all the tayari, and there I saw Alkazi. I was going. I don't think I could have written anything else. Experimental is if you say you are trying to break away from something, and you do so. It wasn't. To me, I was very lucky that, you see what happened, I'll tell you how I wrote Yayati. Because I've written, I don't want to repeat myself. The point is, I was to do my MA, which I didn't do MA. We skipped. I skipped, he also skipped. The first year, neither of us appeared because I think we gallivanted around too much, whatever it is. So I was not ready, and then I felt that if I did my MA and I got my 2nd or 3rd class, then it might be a stain on my Rhodes Scholarship. I'd already got the Rhodes Scholarship. So I didn't do my MA, and during the vacation I went to my brother's house in Benares for a holiday to recoup and so on, and I was reading Rajaji's Mahabharata, beautifully summarized. It's only in 300 pages, but everything worth looking at his, it is an intelligent man's summary. And there I read both the Yavakrita story and the Yayati story. And the Yayati story just excited me, because I think because at the back of my mind was this Antigone. As I said, as soon if Yayati was younger than his son, what could have happened to the girl? Would she demand that now you give me your youth, or you come and sleep with me? And so all this came from, suddenly poured out, and to my utter surprise, I wrote it in Kannada. I used to fancy myself as an English poet. I wanted to write like, go to England, become, a companion of T.S. Eliot and Auden, and get international reputation, all that. And suddenly, I was writing this play in Kannada. It was just pouring out in Kannada. I was like a stenotypist. I literally loaded. Within the 2.5 weeks, I had about 20 days. I think I had finished writing the play. And not only was it a surprise, because I remember that when I was going back from Banaras, I wrote to Ashok, and Ashok came to the Belgaum station. And I got down, and he said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I've just written a play." And I said, "I've written it in Kannada." And Ashok said, "You've written it in Kannada? Why? I thought you'd write it in English." To neither of us, it was, we thought we were going to write in English. Luckily, it came out in Kannada. Then I knew that I would only write in, plays in Kannada. Now, what you said is true, therefore, seeing Alkazi's play somewhere triggered an impulse that took one back into one's own background. It didn't take one out. One great thing, of course, that I learned from Eurydice or Antigone is that this is what you can do with your myths. Suddenly it was clear to me what was wrong with the Pauranic plays. Okay, although I couldn't have phrased it that well, I knew that one of the problems with the Pauranic plays is that they all dripped with bhakti. They dripped with bhakti. And the whole point of a bhakti is ultimately the salvation comes from God. No tragedy is possible. Harishchandra may go through the worst kind of agonies, but that at the end of it, God will appear, or Vishwamitra will appear, or someone will appear. God will save him. So, one of the reasons, quite apart from whatever is said in Natya Shastra about tragedy being not acceptable, one of the reasons our Pauranic plays are so sentimental and incapable of tragedy is that at the end of it, no one will die, no one will suffer. All that suffering will be a test of your faith in God. And I suddenly realized that no, there were sections of Mahabharata, like Yayati and so on, where such salvation was not given. We were almost like the Greek, plays. And now, of course, I know there are hundreds of those stories there. In those days, I didn't. And so the modeling of Yayati was very much, the influence of Alkazi, of Anui. For instance, in all Anui's plays, all debates and conversations take place between two people. Two people argue, one person goes, another person comes. Then this person goes, another person comes, which is how it is in Yayati also. There are two by two scenes. In Tughlaq, I had to break away from it because by that time I had decided I had to. So all those elements came. I can see in Yayati, and I'm grateful to. They might not have come from reading the play, but from having seen them on stage and seeing the impact, I suddenly knew how it could be done. That was, and I think the person who acted Creon was Khote. Was it? He was a Maharashtrian actor. Probably from the Khote family. And then, I wrote Tughlaq, and then I went to England. And funnily, I loved Shakespearean plays in England, but otherwise I was very disappointed with what was happening on English stage. Because in those days the great revolution was John Osborne's Look Back in Anger, then Wesker, Roots. And it struck me that they still remain indoors. They won't get out of the house. It may be that this man's drawing room, who was George Bernard Shaw's drawing room, may have given place to a kitchen. And instead of a sofa, there may be an ironing board on the trip. But they're still indoors. And I felt, the great thing about Shakespeare was that you're outdoors all the time. And I felt that unless we break out of it, there's no hope for Kannada out to my drama anyway, than dramas. So Tughlaq was a conscious decision to break out, I mean, in several ways. But Yayati is very much a well-made play. You know, the climax, the build-up, the climax. It's exactly like a textbook writing of a play. I'll tell you, experiment helped me not so much because of what's happening in Bhulabhai, but what was happening in Cholamandal. Because I went to Madras. You know, in '63 I came, I joined Oxford University Press, I went to Madras, and there I hobnobbed with Madras players who were doing, with whom I did Night of the Iguana, then I did A View from the Bridge, and Crucible, plays like that, the powerful, angry plays from the American thing, which were a great help. And then we did Chekhov. Now, doing Chekhov, Chekhov is really should not be seen. He should just be acted. He's one of those playwrights where you start acting and each day the character yields more meaning, and you say, my God, what depth it's possible, one little line, what can be done, and so on. And compared to him, something like A View from the Bridge, these American playwrights, they become very shallow. You rehearse them for 2 weeks and you don't know where to go anymore. All the passion is spent out of it. But Chekhov just endlessly yields because there's no real confrontation. They're just sort of yielding. So we did that way. I mean, I'm going far away from where I asked. Probably my greatest learning experience after that was a friend of mine called Ammu Matthew, who used to teach in Women's Christian College. She decided to do Cherry Orchard. So she didn't know how to handle boys, because it was all women's college. They had to do, the women's college had to do, everyone, girls were acting the plays. So she said, will you come and teach them to move like men? Because these 16, 17-year-old girls, giggly girls, teaching them Chekhov. So I said yes. So of course, once I came, I took over because then you can't take only a bit of Chekhov out. I mean, it's just Ammo was a dear friend, and we worked on it and so on. And to explain to a 16-year-old college girl who's giggly and just becoming aware how someone like Madame Ranevskaya can be attractive to a man 15 years younger than her. To say no, he's in love with her. You must have love with that older woman. Then you have to say how a man, how. But why isn't he marrying that other girl? She seems quite attractive. It's not, but that's not how it works. So that unraveled a whole world to me. I suddenly realized how extra. So there is much to be said. I think this is how Shakespeare must have learned to actually act in someone else's place and see how it's packed or unpacked. Being an actor helps a great deal. Of course, it helps in another way being a playwright because then you act out each character. If you're an actor, how will I make this character different from that character? That's one way of looking at it. But acting in Madras plays was one thing. That was one thing that made me tremendously, learned. The other thing I learned was that I was associated with Vasudev, S.G. Vasudev. Through him, I got associated with the Madras School of Painting under Panikkar. And what Panikkar said to his generation of students is, you will all become artists and you will go and you will do doodles for different journals and so on. Instead of that, let's start this artist village, Cholamandal, where we can do batiks and so on and so on. And they created Cholamandal, but they had a philosophy which is to go back to the Indian folk roots, motifs, tantric paintings and this and that, that was to me, I mean, although a great inspiration to think of one's own themes. From there to go to Hayavadana is no accident, using masks or not using masks, or you deliberately making the characters flat, not psychologically complex, but like in a storytelling, to see if it works or not, like I did in Hayavadana and then in Nagamandala to some extent. All those experiments to some extent came out of Cholamandala, I would say, the discussions and what theatre one saw there. No, in Bombay, the space that really mattered a lot to me was Chhabildas. Chhabildas, that was when Sulabha and Arvind and mention any theatre man, he was in Chhabildas. And it was so conveniently situated. You came to the other, you just walked down that bridge, and there was this place where you can go sit. Some play was on, a good, bad, whatever it is. That was a real crucible, because you met outside and you chatted, then you saw the play. The seeing of the play was a part of the whole theatre ambience, in Chhabildas. That was one part. The other space, if I were mentioning spaces, that meant was Walchand Terrace to me. Walchand Terrace for 4.5 years was what? It was like going back to a school again. We were there. Everything was happening from, people were fighting, the way were shouting, someone was rehearsing, the people were falling in love, people were falling out of love, getting married. Everything was happening simultaneously. And actually, my most vivid memory of it is one day evening arguing with Tendulkar, both quite drunk, solidly, and then going to sleep and so on, and slept late, and I woke up and there was no Tendulkar, and I turned around and here was Badal Sarkar. I thought I thought, God, I had too much to drink last night. But he had turned up at 2 o'clock, some train, and chalo, chalte hain, Walchand Terrace, and come and slept there. No one to ask, nothing. Someone opened the door and you slept wherever there was a pillow. That was just an extraordinary, those 4 years, at the right time. Even Alik, whom this man didn't like very much, Satyadev Dubey, but even he used to come and drop in and chat and see what's happening. And it was so centrally located, and Tardev, unbelievable it was. And, there was, so in effect, the Walchand Terrace, it really meant there were 3 or 4 spaces had begun to form by that time. One was Rani Burra's, Chinna's flat in the Marine Drive. Then Sham Benegal's flat on that was later, slightly later. I'm talking. And then the Neela house here. And Walchand Terrace, one could just turn up in that area, and wherever doors were open, one would go to sleep. It was really literally. As the performance. But this is where one slept, one got up, one got drunk, and one was sort of. Almost certainly, you see, because Prithvi even then was like that. Prithvi, one would meet and sit and so on. But there were several spaces, as I said, they were all personal spaces, like private houses. You see, I was working with Oxford University Press till 1970 virtually. So when I came to Bombay, I had a job. I would do a job, and this was in between wherever this is. And one was hungry for ideas and so on, one would grab at. So almost certainly everything one heard became grist to the mill. To be with people like Satyadev, to be with people like Arvind Deshpande, who were doing something all the time. They were doing Badal Sarkar, or they were doing something with someone else, they were arguing, they were not arguing. To meet Tendulkar, ask questions. For instance, I asked Tendulkar, even then I said, which he never answered, which I told you, which is Shantata Kotsalo. I said, I can understand that the people are suspicious of her being, that's what the middle class is like. But she confirms it. You make her confirm, and me, papi hai. All that. So he said, Arvind felt there was a need for a dialogue to give her dimension. But I said, your theme collapses completely then. This kind of dialogue could go on without there being any rancor. Before television came onto the scene, that was before 82, theatre was just another matter. Or probably I was young, that may be it at that time. But because at that time it was not only what was happening in Bombay, but the echoes we got from Calcutta, Badal Babu doing, or Shamanan doing, or Satyadev going to this, and from Delhi. I remember Andhayug, Alkazi's Andhayug, this man Satyadev had done it earlier, and then Alkazi brought his Andhayug, and when I went to see him. And I remember, it's very interesting. I remember Satyadev coming out of the theatre at the end of Andhayug. As he was coming, I wanted to see Satyadev. What? And he was so delighted that Alkazi's Andhayug was bad. So I remember he was sliding away, sitting over. So And this kind of thing used to happen all the time. Absolutely, and the need for plays, so that we all translated each other's. There was no competition because it was not as though we were full of plays and our talent. We needed plays. This is why I started translating Sakharam Binder. I translated halfway, then I discovered that there was a good translation which I didn't complete. But then I translated Ebrahim Alkazi into English. This kind of thing. Tendulkar translated Tughlaq into Marathi, and there we felt the abundance of energy, and we benefited. After all, you translate. Translation is a form of trying to take possession. I didn't write it, so let me at least translate it. Let it make it mine. That kind of thing. So that was tremendous there, and it was happening all the time. Something or the other was happening. No. Sense of a movement was definitely there. Because one knew, for instance, the only what called a theatre with a sampradaya at that time was the Marathi theatre. Kannada had no real sampradaya. We didn't have. We had a Sriranga and we had a Kailasam and so on. But the kind of city middle class theatre that Maharashtra had, Kanitkar in our own time, before Himatare or before whatever it is, Ranganekar, that whole non-company natak, urban educated theatre. Now it was very clear that what Tendulkar was doing was very different, or even when Khanolkar was doing was very different. It was immediate that they had broken away from it, and we didn't have a very hard time breaking away because Sriranga already had broken away. Sunojan Major he had written and so on, and I didn't think he was as good a playwright as Dubey thought. Dubey worshipped him. He just sort of said it is Maoist. So I had to agree, because I said if Dubey worships him, he must be very good. So that sense was there, and Badal Sarkar was just, where on Bengal? Bengal had no tradition of theatre at all. There was Shambhuda doing Tagore and things, and then there was Utpal doing his communist CPIM Marxist theatre. Although the rest of the theatre was just company natak, moonlight theatre kind of theatre. In fact, there was one particular story, I must mention this. This is when 68 I was in Calcutta, and Mohan Rakesh was there, and we saw Badal Babu's Ebrahim that was done by Chauvinik. The group Chauvinik did it at that time. I thought they did it brilliantly, but Badal Babu hated it. He said, that's not what I had written, they've ruined my play, etc., etc. And I said, oh, I see. And I said, can I do the play when I go back to Madras? I want to translate it. He said, do it, but you must promise me not to do like Chauvinik, they've put it far. So I said, yes. I came back, translated it, and did exactly like Chauvinik. I loved the production. It was just super. And it conveyed, without the language, it conveyed everything. So I did it in and I told that to Badal Babu much later. But the point of the story I'm coming to is, then Mohan Rakesh and I went to see a Bengali play, very successful musical. So then after a while, Mohan Rakesh started giggling. Then I started giggling. Then he was starting giggling. Then we were both laughing. And then Mohan Rakesh, by the time he told me, you know why we are laughing? I said, why? He said, because the future of Indian theatre is in our hands. He said, literally, Navarna is not a great play, but it was a great production. It was a great something. I think that's the first serious play on the American horizon, on the Indian horizon. Now, earlier there were attempts by Tagore, whom I don't consider a major playwright at all. I think he's very second rate. He's been done, that's another matter. Literally, it is after the first, to me, great play in Indian, this is Andhayug, 54. Where you can take the play, read it and say, my God, I wish I had written it. And you can say to an American English, whatever friend, you understand or not, this is a great play. And this is Satyadev's discovery almost as theatre. And then it is what was happening after that, for once, Tendulkar or Mohan Rakesh were writing plays which were serious, which I wanted to write, the kind of plays I wanted to write. Until then, all the plays produced by the company nataks, Kannada, but even in Marathi, You ultimately remember them. What they produce is great music. You know, Manapman, this, that. But I mean, the play that was when Sharda, Manapman, all that sort of thing, you know. Ekats Pyala, you know, all that sort of thing. One of the reasons is there was no rival attraction. Okay, there was Hindi cinema, then that was another world. Forget it. You were interested in Hindi cinema, forget it. Theatre-wise, there was local theatre, Marathi theatre here, Kannada theatre here, whatever. But the breakaway group, you know, who could expect, you know, say a normal Marathi commercial playwright couldn't expect to be done in Kannada or in Bengali, you know, which Tendulkar could or I could. So we created another universe of our own where we translated each other. We were discussed, you know, in the groups and so on, and with good result. I mean, there were the major reason for it, one must admit, was the National School of Drama. The National School of Drama wanted plays. They wanted plays to teach. So they encouraged translations of plays into Hindi. Then what the National School of Drama did, for the first time, it acknowledged the need for a director. You know, before that there was no Kona director, kai prani. You know, this is what you used to hear in places like Bangalore. You know, actually there is a G.V. Joshi has written a play saying, I don't know where this animal called director comes into it and he ruins our plays. Karant was the first experience we had of a trained director, you know, who took a play, read it, and that phenomenon was also happening for the first time. Someone like Satyadev, for instance, who, if he said he will do a play, he knew the play, he knew his text. You know, you couldn't argue with him because he would tell me of lines from the plays which I had forgotten. You know, he said, no, it's like that, and so on. So someone who looks at the text to be produced and then makes it his own, you know, that kind of phenomenon, Shavanand with Badal Sarkar and all that, that was new also. So, and to that I think came to some extent because of the glamorization of the director, thanks to the National School of Drama. You know, one must acknowledge to National School, then whatever the reasons, we had, you know, here Arvind, we had Satyadev Dubey, we had Shamanand Jalan there, we had Karant there, you know, all of whom sort of gelled with each other. You must remember that independence was just over. 1947 was independence. We are now talking of 60s. So some 15 years had passed since independence, and nationalism and patriotism were not required to realize that we needed to go in a new direction. We were not justifying ourselves to the Westerner now. You know, we were justifying ourselves to ourselves now, to say what we should do. You know, we didn't need like Sarojini Naidu is praised by some English critic, and everyone says, oh, he's you know, praised by an English critic. Now that wasn't required. Now we responded to each other's criticism, you know, and broke away. And that was a new mood. Economically, of course, the country was in depression. All that was there. You know, the 5-year plan, nothing was happening. People were droves, they were going to America, England and so on. People today forget that that was happening in those days. But there was this consciousness that we must look into our past, which has been ignored for the colonial period, and, you know, look of, you know, that which was considered even tasteless, you know, the folk theatre and all that sort of thing, which was considered childish. That was, the revaluation was coming in the intellectual circles also. So it helped us and vice versa. The Navya movement came in Kannada in the 1950s, you know, 60s. Karnataka had a different experience. One of the reasons why Karnataka, the 50s, was a completely different experience from any other language in India is that for the first time the state became united. You know, Bengal was separated, you know, Assam was taken away, Bihar was taken away. They always regret linguistic reorganization because they lost their Bengali empire. But for Karnataka, we were 4 different states with nothing, no interchange of idea at all. Old Mysore was so beholden to the English, to the British, because, you know, they were under that no radical thinking was possible. So anything that happened in Old Mysore was Hindutwadi, in a sense. We were looking at our past, our culture, our music, Bharatanatyam, all that was happening there. Hyderabad, Karnataka was part of Hyderabad, Karnataka. It was wilderness and nothing was happening, nothing is happening even today because it was destroyed virtually. South Canara, because it was under the influence of the missionaries and the trade, because the missionary educational facilities they created, printing they created tile factories and so on, developed a kind of commercial economy which North Karnataka didn't have. You know, all the 4 or 5 big banks, Vijaya Bank, Canara Bank, they all came out of South Canara, that tiny little district. Well, almost every bank of North Karnataka went into liquidation because of swindles. You know, because the whole commercial attitude to money was different in the north. What was distinct about North Karnataka was this consciousness that we had to equal or match Marathi, that we were dominated by that culture, and that, you know, we had to create a literature, we had to, Alur Venkatrao and so on, they are full of references to how they wanted to be, you know, match the Marathi influence. I remember my mother saying to me, you know, your father has accepted transfer to Sirsi, so he's taken you from a land of culture to land without civilization. You know, this was really the feeling, that to go to Karnataka was really to be without, and the North Karnataka people behaved like that. The women were sent to Marathi schools so that they could learn Marathi, because very often they married also into Maharashtra, you know, and it was probably not totally wrong, because modern Kannada literature, particularly what affected the middle class, say novels, really begin in the late 20s and the 30s. You know, the great Kannada novelists, say someone like Shivram Karnad, someone like Kuvempu, they were all written in the 30s, you know, by which time the real reading material for the middle class was Marathi, all translated from Marathi, Galagnath, you know, and all that kind of. There is in fact a history of Kannada literature which says the first Kannada novelist was called Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. You know, that's where the flow was from there. It was Shah Balu Rao who has written that, and he was called Bankim Chandra. But otherwise, if what didn't come via Bengal came via Maharashtra, you know. And as I said, probably the revolution was read by people like Bendre and Shamba Joshi and the Maharashtrian families there, because they knew that they will not get any place in Pune. So they had to create a revolution in Dharwad. You know, if they were intelligent, they were capable, they had to do it in Kannada, because in Marathi they wouldn't have been accepted at all. They would have been treated as provincials. You know, so they did it in Dharwad, which was the capital of North Karnataka. So, but 56 opened it all up. You know, we suddenly started reading each other. The focus shifted from Bombay to Bangalore. Otherwise, for all jobs, we used to come to Bombay, to Maharashtra and so on. And a certain energy, economic energy, all that started in a very striking fact about Karnataka and Maharashtra, if you compare, which I said earlier, is if you look at 19th century intellectual map, in Maharashtra you get Tilak, you get Agarkar, you get Ambedkar, you get, mention them, they're all there. Even Savarkar, I wouldn't mention him, but even Savarkar, he was an intelligent. And there were social record. There is not a single name in Karnataka of equivalent caliber. Forget Tagore's, we didn't have Tagore's and Gandhi's and Nehru's, forget it. But even at the regional level of those who argued, and, you know, there was nothing in Karnataka. Because there was no exchange of ideas in Karnataka at all. You know, you were in North Karnataka, you were in your little thing, and you were responding to Maharashtra. There was Mysore state in its own little problems. So, literally any kind of intellectual and creative energy came after. I mean, there were good writers earlier, but they became common bliss in the 50s. So, we benefited enormously because of linguistic reorganization. Well, the journalism was solidly for us. You got free publicity. You did a play like Samskara and you got 5 articles on it, you know, full page articles. You did a film like Vangshuruksha, they were all to be on your side. They were hungering. So we got, you know, we didn't need to advertise, we didn't need to spend money on that. You just had to give a party and the journalists came and they wrote. There was this whole identification of middle class journalism with middle class literature and middle class cinema, middle class arts. The middle class was really asserting itself in the 50s and 60s. Satyajit Ray was a model for that reason. He was understandable, he was touching, he was moving, and he used great literature, because this identification with literature was very important. This is why we produced then Samskara, we produced Namshuruksha. And the novels seemed a stamp of somehow authenticity and greatness. Original script writing never occurred to us, almost. We kept on looking for a good novel. Ultimately, you must acknowledge, going to a play was easy in those days. If a middle class family wanted to go to play, they had to get out and get into an auto and rickshaw and go. Today you can't do it. By the end of the day, you are exhausted, and the idea of stepping out into those streets with the traffic and the chaos and pollution, it's just no one wants to. The one requirement of a performing art, whether it is theatre or a dance or music, is that people have to come to that place. But today the traffic situation and the infrastructure in a place like Bangalore, not in Dharwad, Dharwad is still, but I don't know, it's probably happening to Hubli, is so chaotic that people just don't want to get out. But in the 60s and 70s, you could announce a play in the morning and people used to come because there was nothing to do in the evening, no television. Even today the TV is bad, but at least there is TV. There was nothing there, people had nothing to do and they would come. And you could easily walk because the roads were walkable. It's not that the distances have increased in Bangalore, but the travelling has become impossible now. People won't come. So now theatre, if it has to develop in a place like Bangalore, has to become for that area. Rangashankara, for instance, appeals to all the neighbourhood. Where the young people live, they come, it's geared to them, the fare that comes, and then it survives every day. Any possibility of someone from Malleshwaram coming is impossible now. It's not possible. We could land up in Sham's house. We could land up in Vinod Doshi's house. Sunil Pradhan's house. Party is Zoplo. Now, whether they still do it or not, I don't know. The point I was making is the spaces that mattered very often in a place like Bombay is say someone like Vinod Doshi's house, in Neela house, the drawing room, where we went, met, slept, what was Shyam Benegal's living room, Sunila Pradhan's house. We sort of moved en masse there and sat down and chatted and drank and ate and so on. And they were spaces, particularly with Vinod and this he was, well, even with Shyam, I suppose, or with Sunila. The point is, they were not just hosts, they were participants. They took part in what we were doing. Sunila was, of course, acting, and Shyam was directing films which I was scripting, and Satyadeva was writing this. And Vinod was, it's just amazing. I mean, he not only gave space for plays, he used to act himself. He loved acting on stage. He was in Arvind Deshpande's Tughlaq, the Marathi Tughlaq that he did. He, I think, was in Badal Sarkar's whatever, Rupkatha, Vallabhpurchi Rupkatha he acted in. He was there in the films, Kaliyug and so on. The costumes of Tughlaq were designed by Saryu, So the participation was not just holding a salon and we coming in there. It was all part of the whole thing. And when we wrote Kaliyug, Shyam had always been fascinated with the story of Karan. And he said, Karan, I want to write a script, will you write? So I said, why write a mythological? I mean, you go into all kinds of hassles. In those days, there were all these battles going on within industrial families. Brothers were cutting each other's throats, killing each other, cousins, and so on and so on. So why don't we use that? And Shyam liked it. And then we talked to Vinod, and Vinod said, done. Now the question is, what were the strategies of attack? You have to know how these families worked within. If you really wanted to pull down your cousin while maintaining a front of a family together, then you had to know what kind of stuff. And all that was done with by, in Kaliyug, the entire underbelly of the script was written by Vinod Doshi. He not only wrote, he wrote a script, which was, full script of Kaliyug, which was, he should have got a credit. He didn't get credit as a co-script writer. He should have got a credit. I said to Sham, it was not just Sham and me. His contribution was as great about how these families work. We would never have known of the tricks and tricks that could be used. So with Vinod and Saryu and with all these people, the marvelous thing is that they were part of it. They were part of our activity. So we didn't just feel that yes, we were coming and eating in their house. And of course Lagu was there, and Lagu was doing his Gidhade, and all this was going simultaneously. Amol was there. Amol was with Satyadev. Satyadev was doing Hayavadhan, he did that. Now a space like that is unimaginable. Now of course, because spaces are not, but the contribution of a space like that is unimaginable also. Because it's cannot be quantified. Because all the fights, the love affairs, all that happened there was also a part of the whole scenario. Walchand was just central. The point was that whether you were at the southern tip of Bombay or northern tip of Bombay, you just had to arrive at Tardeo, walk in, the carpets from that corner of that hall to this corner at night, and pillows and mattresses. You could, in the afternoon, you could go to sleep, the rehearsals would be going on, they would be rolled up for rehearsals. This is kind of multi-purpose with Satyadev. It was meant to be given for both Arvind and Satyadev, but because Arvind had a home and a wife and a family, he had to go back home. Therefore, it became Satyadev's domain complete. Arvind himself told me, that told him, don't do any office work. I'm employing you, you do theatre. He was employed to do theatre, and he said, don't, hazari gizari kai nako, you just don't worry about office work. You be my officer and do theatre. Who would make a gesture? Just that kind of passion. So.
Okay.